Saturday, June 19th. Welcome everyone to our garden here in Southern California in the Los Angeles area. We have lots of things growing, and today we'll be concentrating and talking about the cucurbits, which includes plants like your watermelons, squashes, pumpkins, and cucumbers. We're going to be looking at a couple of direct sowed watermelon plants here. This is the Sugar Baby, one of my favorite ones to grow. They grow these personal sized watermelons that are nice and sweet, and these plants look very happy. Some of our watermelon that we grew as transplants aren't as happy this year. I really haven't been able to tend to them properly, so we may not get nice large ones, but maybe personal size watermelon. And by looking at the leaves, they're not as plentiful and as large, so that's an indicator of how they're gonna perform when it comes time to making a watermelon. And this one is my favorite type of watermelon. It's the orange glow. It makes an orange flesh watermelon that has a very unique taste. As far as the red watermelon, this is the Klondike Striped Blue Ribbon, one of my favorite red seeded watermelons to grow. And when we move along this way, we have a few vining type of cucurbits. The first one we're going to look at is this Gherkin type of cucumber, and the plant was sent to us by Burpee, and it is one of the plants that we're growing as a trial for them. These are some of the gherkins that they're making, and we already picked about 5 of them, and this variety is called Gherkin, and it should be available for the public to purchase as plants next year in 2022. Down below our gherkin is a pumpkin that we're growing for Halloween. It's called Howden. And then as we pan this way, we have another type of pumpkin, but I guess rather it's called a squash, called the Thai Cob Kang. And this is a very interesting plant in the way it's growing, because last year what happened was we grew the plant up there and it sent some vines down this way, and some of the vines, when they hit the soil, will grow roots. And what happened was this plant overwintered, and that's something that's very surprising. We never expect a vine to overwinter, and from that spot where it sent roots down, it turned into this big patch of pumpkin or squash plant. And in there we have a Thai Cob Kang squash that's forming. We'll try to zoom in and get that lighting corrected for you. So there it is right there, and it's about the size of my hand right now. It's difficult to see with the way the camera's picking up the lighting, so we're not going to get too close in there with the camera. And then up above we have some luffa plants at the tip of my finger there, and they're going to grow in that area. As we move along, we're going to see some of the summer squashes, and then before we see the summer squash, this is another Howden pumpkin for Halloween. And as things warm up here in Southern California, we're not going to be outside using the lawn as much, and the pumpkin will take over. It'll provide some nice shade to the grass, and then we'll have the space to grow pumpkins. So that's one of the nice things about summertime in California. If we're not going to be outside, we can at least use the lawn and the space for growing pumpkins. Down here is a summer squash, and they're really easy to grow, and we usually grow one plant of one variety because it is a very prolific plant, as it is aptly named for this variety called the early straight neck prolific, and it is a very abundant type of crop for us, and we like to pick them at around 6 inches and not longer because they are most tender and sweet at that length. We can also pick them as little tiny couple inch baby squashes as well and stir fry them up. Here we have a couple of pickling cucumbers that we're growing in these 3-gallon containers, and it's up here now. We already picked a couple of plants, and there's another one over there. In the greenhouse we have this melon here. It's a musk melon, and I'm not a big fan of cantaloupe, but when it comes to the musk melon, cantaloupes are part of the musk melon family. And for this variety, it's a French heirloom variety called a Charente, and it makes these softball size melons that have flesh that is very nice. It's a soft textured flesh, almost like a papaya, and like a papaya, the sweetness reminds me of nectar. So it's like a nice sweet Hawaiian papaya. The cantaloupes at the supermarket, I'm not a big fan because the texture it's somewhere between hard and soft, and the flavors, the sweetness it's just not as nice as the Charente. And the other plant that Burpee sent us for trialing is the Mexican sour gherkin, and this is their variety. You may know this generally as a cucamelon. So we have it growing in the greenhouse, and the plan for this plant is to let it grow outside that vent there and encapsulate the greenhouse and keep it cool during our really hot summers. So we'll see how that goes. And you can see some of the cucamelons, or I should say the Mexican sour gherkin, forming on here. So we have some of those guys. And I learned from gardeners that the cucamelon is quite difficult to germinate. It's a very prolific plant, but I'm very surprised that it's a difficult plant to germinate. Here we have another succession sowing of summer squash, and one of the strategies when growing squash is when the plant gets to a certain size, I like to start a new plant to replace it. So once it gets to about this size, we have another plant that's about a seedling, and we'll remove this plant and replace it with another plant, because it gives us a break from eating so many of the summer squashes, and also we'll grow a plant that is more robust. As the plant ages, it gets on the decline and it starts to have issues with powdery mildew. So rather than deal with trying to make the plant happy, we'll just replace it with another more robust plant. So here, as we're talking about summer squashes, we have a patty pan squash. This is a bush type, and it's also known as a scallop squash. So there it is right there, and it is going to grow, and we're going to have some scallop squashes as we wait for the other of the summer squashes to grow. We'll take a break and enjoy the scallop squashes. And I'm going to take a quick pause and talk about the asperbrock. This is one that has been really prolific for us. It's a variety that we're growing this year. It's a hybrid between Chinese kale and broccoli, and it makes these side shoots. And their name, asperbrock, is a combination of asparagus and broccoli, and the shoots are actually tender and sweet, kind of like asparagus. And it is June here in Southern California, which is the warm part of the year, and it's still producing for us. So that's the asperbrock. It's also known as broccolini. Broccolini is a trademark name, and they can't sell it as that, so you can find it as asperbrock. Here's another plant. It's and we get a lot of side shoots from it. All right, now let's go back to our cucurbit tour, and in here we have a couple cucurbits. The melon here, or I should say pumpkin here we're growing, has been a surprise to us in many ways. This is a new to us variety. It's a Tai pumpkin, and we're growing it to harvest seeds that are hulless. And we want the pumpkin seeds without having to shell them, and the pumpkin seeds we would use for making a green pozole. And this year we're growing this for the first time ever, and two things that has surprised me: the size of the pumpkin. I thought it was going to be somewhere the size of a football shape, so it's got this really big pumpkin here. The second thing that has surprised me is that I thought it was a vining type, but rather it's a bush type. So kind of like the summer squashes, it just grows in one spot. I was expecting it to be a vining type, and I was expecting it so that it would grow up onto our slope and grow up that way, but rather it's down here now. So here's the big one, and then we'll see if we can go in there and look at the other ones later on. We have planes in the landing path, so if they're coming up in your audio, please excuse that noise. Today's a busy day, and there's no time than the present to do this cucurbit tour. All right, we're gonna have to pass our golden bantam corn, so we may pick up some noise on the microphone of me rustling through here. I'll try to talk through it and show you the other cucurbit that is growing. This is a wattled trellis that we made from garden stakes, and it was a quick way to make a trellis. And we have some Japanese cucumber growing on them, and these are the long slender cucumber. And let me try to find better lighting for you. So here's one. They grow like this. They're nice and long and slender, and it is a very prolific plant. And the seeds, we got a couple of seeds from a gardener, and we have 2 plants in here. So underneath the cucumber is a bitter melon that's growing in here, and we'll try to find it. So you'll see bitter melon that's growing in there, and the strategy is that we'll let the bitter melon grow, and when this cucumber plant is done, we'll cut it down, and then the bitter melon will take over, and that way we can get more stuff growing without having to do transplants. As we discovered last year, we have the tomatillo here, and then there was a volunteer bitter melon that grows over. So here's one down here. So here's a bitter melon plant, and so that's the strategy. And let's see if we can show you some more of those pumpkins that are just super beautiful to look at. So we have 2, and then there's a couple more. We planted four plants up there, 4 bush plants. 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're gonna head out and look at a couple more. Pardon the corn there. We're gonna look at a couple more plants, and we're gonna go to the side yard and then to the front yard for a second. So over here we have where it's super noisy. So over here we have a couple of my favorite type of cooking pumpkins, or actually we have a couple of pumpkin types out here, but we're going to be looking at my favorite type of cooking pumpkin, which is the Heirloom sugar pie pumpkin. And we have one that's down here, and I hear the duck chirping, and he says, feature me in your video. This is a penguin. He's a heritage breed duck. He's a blue Swedish or Swedish blue. So we have a couple of the pumpkins that are growing in there. And if you're curious about this plant, this is a glass gem corn. The corn that we passed earlier is the golden bantam corn. And then out here we have another type of corn called the Seneca Stalker Red. That's over there. And we are mindful about cross-pollination, and maybe we'll talk about corn in a specific video and get into the details about how we mind the cross-pollination. So we're looking at this plant here, which is another type of squash. It's a Tai San squash, or I should say pumpkin, and we got these seeds from a neighbor who, when you grow and you're a gardener, you can spot other gardeners, and she shared these seeds with us, and it's from her hometown region, and we're growing the Tai San pumpkin. And let me swing around and show you one that is forming, and let's see if we can find it. Here it is. My son hand pollinated this a few days ago, so it's growing here, and I don't know what it looks like. I imagine it's similar to the Thai pumpkin and the Japanese pumpkin, which is your round and flat one. So it's growing this way, and looks right now more like a butternut squash type pumpkin. So it'll be interesting to see how that one grows. And lastly, we have my favorite summer squash to grow, which is the Black Beauty. It's an heirloom variety, and it's also known as Italian squash. So let's get in there and look at some of the squash plants that are formed, or fruit. And we have this one, which is the size we like to harvest, and then sometimes they get a little bit too big, and we have to pick it, otherwise the plant won't produce more. So that's why this one's just laying here. So we have quite a few. It's a very prolific plant that grows, and that's pretty much the cucurbits. Oh, almost forgot some of the other cucurbits out here, which are your watermelon. This is a scaly bark watermelon, and then on the other side is an orange glow. And before we leave, there are more pickling cucumbers, and this plant we're just gonna let it go to seed now. So these cucumbers we're gonna let mature and collect the seeds for next time. This is the national pickling cucumber. And then we'll just close our tour today with a quick glimpse of the scaly bark watermelon. There's one more type of cucurbit that I almost forgot to share with you, and it is our wax melon that's growing along the retaining wall here. It's a viney type, and it will grow up onto the hedge and produce a square type wax melon, otherwise known as a wax gourd. And we have a younger plant right next to it that is about a foot, or actually 2 feet away. And one of the things when it comes to cucurbits is I often misspell it, and you will hear the way I misspell it when I pronounce it, which is cucurbit. And it is not cucurbit, it's C-U-C-U-R-B-I-T, cucurbit. So I think I may have said that in our cucurbit tour today, and I wanted to make sure I got that right for you. And that's our tour of how they're growing. And be sure to check back for future videos on specific harvests or updates on those types. And then also please be sure to come back and check out the other types of plants that we're growing, and I'm hoping to be able to give you a specific tour on those, like our peppers and our tomatoes. For 2021, the tomato growing episode 1, and you can catch that to see all the different types of tomatoes that we're growing. And I want to come back and give you a summer update and do that video once more.